Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another exciting session about MoGraph. So today we have Elly here, we have Lionel Vicidomini here, and
Hello.
myself, Jonas Pilz. And yeah, we are all Cinema 4D trainers, and today we want to talk about vertex map and how you can modify them and play with them using MoGraph. But before we start, I want to take care of the housekeeping here. So I guess you can see my screen, right?
Yep.
Today from the beginning. That's cool. So yeah, if you go to the Maxon website and then you go to events, news, events, then you come to this nice little page where you can see all of the events that we are doing here, all of the webinars, and all of them are for free. So yeah, every Monday we've got our demystifying post-production series, and this month, as I said before, we have multidimensional MoGraph as the topic, but we also have the 3D motion show this week on Wednesday, and also a beginner's course, hands-on with Maxon. Yeah, Cinema 4D beginners course with Elly and Matt. And on Thursday, we will have another Ask the Trainer session. So you can prepare your questions about like all of our Maxon products and ask them there, and we try our best to answer them. Yeah, and that's pretty much it with this side. If you missed one of our sessions and want to learn something, please visit the Maxon Training Team YouTube channel, because this is the place where we are hosting all of the recordings of our previous webinars. So there's a lot to discover here. And also, we want to give away a few free t-shirts. So if you want to have a t-shirt, you can go to the what is it called? The section here in the GoToWebinar interface. I only have the German
Oh,
interface.
the handout section.
The handout section, exactly. Thank you, Elly. Um, and there you will find a PDF with some useful links. One of them is the link to our Maxon merch store, and there is a coupon code in there. And if you use that during checkout, you will get the t-shirt for free. You only have to pay for the shipping. And the other thing that is in there is Lionel's courses at Udemy that he's sharing with a nice discount. So if you want to learn more Cinema 4D stuff from Lionel, just go this way and you will get it with a discount. Cool. So having all of that said, I want to hand over to Elly, because Elly is going to show the first cool stuff
I
here
am.
in this one. So let me make you the presenter.
Cool, thanks.
Here you go. All right.
Cool, there we go. Let me know when you can see my screen.
Now we do.
Cool, cool. Right, hey everyone, how's it going? So I thought I would show you guys a mix of vertex maps and MoGraph, because you know that was the whole topic for this month. So let me just kind of play this back, and hopefully it plays quite well. And so, you know, we have like these like grass and flowers growing over the top of this text. And this is using like a vertex map growth. And we're combining it with some of the MoGraph effectors. So I thought it'd be a cool thing to kind of kick off this next hour with before handing over to the guys for more cool stuff. So let me just move this out of the way so I can see what I'm doing. So this is the setup, and we're basically just going to build it all from scratch because it's quite a quick thing to make. And it'd be cool to go through some of the different elements. So first things first, we are just going to grab our text. And in here, we are just going to keep it super simple and write the word grow. And then let's do like a depth of 30. And then we want to find like a nice bold font because we want that kind of nice area which we can then kind of subdivide and create a vertex map growth on top of. And so the font I'm going to go for is actually called Roboto, which I'm a bit of a fan of. And then we're just going to change the type to black. And we get this nice surface area now for our growth. And the only other thing I'm going to do is I like to keep my alignment to the middle. That's just a personal preference of mine. Cool, right, so we have our text. And I'm just going to rotate it. So I'm going to rotate it 90, and then we're going to lift it up by 30 centimeters. And this is basically the start of our scene. So what do we need to do? So when we're talking about vertex maps, we're looking basically at the amount of subdivisions on our text. That's quite an important kind of aspect, because when we look at vertex maps, we have to make our objects editable. It has to be on editable objects because it's looking at the points, and it's basically going to save a weight value of 0 to 1 for each point on our objects. And this is going to make a lot more sense when we actually set up some vertex weight, and when we kind of like see our yellow and red kind of growth across our text here. And so I don't want to make my text editable yet, because first of all, if we go to our shading lines, we can see that we haven't really got a lot of subdivisions going on. Especially on the front caps, on this kind of front face here, we haven't got any. We've just got one kind of individual polygon. So our vertex weight is going to be looking for like points near each other, and there aren't really any. There aren't really enough to warrant like a good enough growth. So before we make our text editable, or before we make any object editable, ready for a vertex map, we want to adjust our subdivisions first. I'm going to set these up. And so what I'm going to do, I'm going to only set them up because later on, we're only going to be using this kind of like top kind of cap to grow on. So I'm not too bothered about the subdivisions on the side or the depth, but I'll show you how you can set those up as well, just in case you need them. So inside of my text, inside of my caps, this is where, you know, we can add our nice like bevel and rounding, which we can do. Like we could just add like maybe a little bit of rounding here, just so like things look a little bit nicer and like smoother in our viewport. And where we can add our subdivisions is this caps type area here. So by default, it's set to Ngon. So we just have the one kind of cap polygon face. But if we drop this down, we have a bunch of different options. And the one that I'm going to go for is called regular grid. So if I select regular grid, we can now see that we have a lot more subdivisions happening on this front face of our grow text. And so normally it would be kind of looking like this, but if you drop this tiny little arrow down here, we have a size and a quad dominant option as well. And I'm gonna enable quad dominant, and if we have a look, we'll see kind of how this slightly changes. So if I select that, we can see now we have majority kind of like quads going on, and we have a lot more subdivisions, and in turn a lot more points. And this is all going to help when it comes to setting up our vertex map. So at the moment, my size is 10 centimeters. And so I'm actually going to kind of like, I'm going to shrink this down a little bit because I want a few more subdivisions going on. And so I'm going to maybe put this something like 6 centimeters. And as you can see now, we have a lot more kind of subdivisions going on. And so this is fine for what I need, but I'm actually also just going to really quickly show you how you could set up subdivisions on the rest of these areas as well, just in case you need to. So inside my object tab, inside of my text, we have something called intermediate points. And by default, it's set to adaptive. And basically what adaptive means is if we take a look at this kind of area here, we can see this really kind of like flat straight area is one polygon. So it's not being subdivided because Cinema 4D can see that it's just this like straight line. And so it's adapting its points. And it knows, because it's a straight line, it doesn't need to be kind of subdivided as much as, let's say, this kind of curved, rounded area here. And so it's adapting the amount of points and therefore the amount of subdivisions based on the areas that need it most. And this is great because it speeds up a lot of things like in the viewport, and it speeds up our workflow. But if you were looking at creating a all over subdivided kind of style or look, we would need to change this to something called subdivided. And if we have a look, we can now see we have a much more kind of uniform subdivision going on, and we can adjust our maximum length to get, as well as our angle, to get kind of a more uniform effect. And then the only other thing is, if I was kind of doing this all over, is I would increase my subdivisions on my depth, which is this value here. So if we up this, we can now see that we have kind of a pretty regular subdivision grid across all of our text. But as I said, I'm not really worried about these areas, because my growth for my vertex map and my MoGraph stuff is all going to be happening on this top cap. So I don't need to worry about doing the rest yet, or at all. So now we need to make our text editable. As I was saying, we have to, when we're setting up a vertex map, one, it needs to be on the points, which means two, it needs to be an editable object. And so there's two different ways we can do this. The first way is by checking this little button here, which is make editable, or if you're on anything kind of pre-25, I think it's up here, I'm pretty sure. Or we can just use the handy little shortcut, which is the C key. So if I have my text selected, I can hit my C key, and then we have, if we drop down all of our nulls, we can then see we have our final grow null, and we have all of our like extrude generators and splines. And this is great. This is what we need. But I'm not worried about having them as individual generators. So I'm just going to right click on my very top null and go to connect objects and delete. And it's going to look at everything below it, connect it all together as to one individual object. And my favorite thing when you make text editable is these wonderful polygon selection tags and edge selection tags that it gives you, and it creates for you automatically. And it's storing the information inside of each of these tags. So this second one, I know C1, I'm sad enough to know the codes, and I know C1 is my top cap. So if I double click that, we can see that that is the selection of my entire top cap. And this is great because when it comes to duplicating things later on and like working with MoGraph with this, I can actually use this selection tag straight away to help with my kind of cloning. But before we get to that, let's set up our vertex map. So first things first, we've got to go into points mode. And what I want to do, I want to set up a vertex weight that's going to start on one of the points on my letter G, and it's going to grow all the way across over to the end of my text. And so let's just grab one tiny little point. I'm just going to grab this one little individual point here, and I'm going to come up to select, and then all the way down the bottom, we have a set vertex weight. And then it's going to ask me what percentage value do you want to set this vertex weight at for this point? And I want it to be a value of 100%. So I want 100% weight on this one point. So let's have a look. Let's enter 100%. Okay. And now what's happened? So everything's gone red apart from this little area here that's nice and yellow. And so this yellow area, so this one point, has a vertex weight of 100%. And then all the red areas have a vertex weight of 0%. And then you can see like there's a little gradient in the middle that's a gradient from a value of like 0 to 1 or 0 to 100%. So what else has happened? We also have now a tag, a vertex map tag on our text. And if we click that, under our basic tab, we don't have a whole lot of settings, but we do have one extremely powerful setting which we can enable, and that is the ability of using fields within our vertex map. And so, we want to create like a growth. So what we're going to do, I'm going to enable my use fields, and then I can come into my fields tab. So still inside my vertex map tag, we can go to fields, and then automatically, when we check use fields in a vertex map tag, it gives us this freeze modifier layer. And so modifier layers is the third little tab here, and they allow us to do a variety of different things. Like we can invert things, we can create like smoothing, we can create like a delay spring effect. And so they're really powerful, and they really kind of like create some cool effects, especially within like MoGraph. So let's have a look at my freeze. So how do we create a growth? So if we click our freeze, we then get our layer controls down here. And one of the modes is called grow. So I'm just going to grab grow. And if we actually look here, we can see that this kind of yellow area has got a little bit bigger. And basically what the grow is going to do is it's going to look for a point within 10 centimeters of its next point, and it's going to then grow our vertex map weight across my entire text based on this radius. So if we leave it at 10 for now and we press play, cool. So we're kind of getting the effect, but it's stopping here and it's not jumping across. So I'm not worried about this red area at the bottom because, you know, as we know, we're only going to be focusing on this top cap and using that. So I'm not really bothered about this, but I do want it to jump to the next letter. And so when we originally grabbed the point and we set our vertex weight, we could have grabbed a point on every single letter, and then it would have grown on every single letter at the same time. And that could be cool, that could be a cool effect, but I only want it to grow from left all the way to right. And so what I need to do is I need to adjust my radius enough that it can see the point from G to R. So it needs to be able to jump over. And so if we just sort of, I don't know, 24. Okay, cool. So our radius is 24. We can now see we're getting a bit of yellow here. And so if we play, we're now having it grow all the way across like we want to. However, because we now have a radius of 24, everything is happening so quickly. So we can kind of compensate for this by then reducing our effect strength. And so if I change this to something like 20%, the effect is going to happen a lot slower. So even though our radius is at 24, it's going to go back to being that nice kind of like smooth growth instead of everything happening within like 25 frames, which is a little bit too fast. Cool. So I'm just going to increase my frames to maybe like 120. And so now we're getting that growth all the way along. So eventually when we get to the end of my timeline, we have pretty much 100% yellow across the top face of my entire text. Cool, right, so we've set up our text, we've set up our subdivisions, made it editable, and now we've set up our vertex map weight and our growth. How do we now combine this with MoGraph? So let's grab some stuff to clone, because that's what we want to do. So inside our asset browser, so everything I use is just inside of our asset browser. And if we go to objects and then to plants, we have these little grass elements, and I'm going to grab the low res ones. And I just grabbed like a bunch of these and just clone them along the top of my text. And so let's have a look. So let's just get some of these. All I'm doing is double clicking. And so normally they would then kind of download, but because as you can see, I've already been using them, I don't need to worry about downloading these again. Cool, let's leave it at that. And the other thing I'm going to do on my dandelions, I'm just going to do that same trick, connect objects and delete, just so I have one kind of single object here. Cool, right, so I'm just going to make them a little bit bigger. So I've just grabbed them all, went back into model mode and held T, scaled everything up a little bit. And now we're going to clone this across the top face of our text. So I'm going to grab my cloner. And I'm just going to make everything a child of my cloner. And so by default, it's going to clone it in like a grid array. But what we want to do is we want to change this mode to object. And then once we do that, we can actually drop in our text object and clone our grass and flower elements along it. So let me just drop that in there. So it's looking a little bit strange. So first of all, the rotation is a little bit weird. It's kind of on its side. And secondly, we're kind of cloning things on like the side of our text, as well as this top cap. But this is where our selections, our polygon selections, come in handy. So as we remember, this second one here is our C1, which is like our top cap. And so we can actually just drag this into this selection area here, and then it's only going to clone on this polygon selection, which is exactly what we want. So I'm going to drag that in there, and now we can see we're only getting it on this top area. And all we need to do to sort out our rotation is inside of our transform, our rotation P, we need to do -90 just to kind of correct that orientation. And then from here, all we need to do is increase our count, something like 3,500. So we have a lot more clones along the top of our text. One other thing I like to do, so at the moment it's going to iterate between each one, so it's going to kind of put them all in order continuously. And as much as I can't really tell because there's so much going on, I still like to add a bit of kind of additional randomization by changing our clone mode to random, just so it's kind of a little bit more varied. And speaking of randomization, I also like to add a random effector, and we're going to use that to control and change and vary our scale and a little bit of the rotation as well. So if my clone is selected, I'm going to come in and I'm going to grab a random effector. Oh, it did do it. My eyes just didn't work then. Okay, cool. And by default, it's going to adjust our position, which we don't want. So we're going to switch that off because we want it to maintain on our top of our text. And I'm just going to come into my scale, and we want it to be scaled uniformly. So enter a value of like 1. And then maybe we can do a bit of rotation as well on here, just to add a little bit more kind of like variation. And so when it grows, it's going to not look as uniform. Okay, so we've now set up our cloned grass and our cloned flower elements, and we've got some randomization going on. But now, how do we connect our vertex map growth with this cloner setup? And so what I want to do, I want it to make it look like they're appearing and growing over my text. So the first thing I want to do is I want to create an effector that's going to scale everything down by 100%. And so I know that I can use a plane effector for that. And I'm going to switch off my position again. And I'm going to come back into scale and uniform scale. And if we enter a value of -1, it basically is scaling all of our cloned grass elements down by a value of 1, which is a value of 100%. So everything's disappeared. And then what we can do is we can use our vertex map weight or tag inside of our fields menu to then kind of make it look like they're then coming back and scaling up. And so I'm going to get my little vertex map tag. I'm going to drop that into here. And what you'll notice is it's kind of the wrong way around at the moment. And so everything is scaling down based on our vertex map. We want it to scale up. And so if this is the look that you want, then cool, leave it here. But if not, and if like me, you want it to make it look like they're appearing or growing, then all we have to do is inside our plane effector, inside our fields menu, we're just going to grab another modifier layer, and this is going to be an invert. And basically, it's just going to invert our vertex map. And then now we have the effect that we're after. Cool.
Great stuff.
Cool. So yeah, I'm aware it's 25 past, so I won't go into too much more. The only other thing that I maybe would add, because it's looking a little bit uniform, because I don't want to add delay, because delay is something we're doing next week. But I would add maybe a decay inside of here, and this is just going to create a nice bit of kind of slight smoothing, so it's not as rigid. Yeah. Any questions?
Well, we answered a few in the background,
Cool.
and most of them weren't really related. But one question was, is there another way of creating a vertex map except for like selecting one point and then setting the vertex weight to like 100 or 0% and so on? And Lionel answered that you can use the paint tool, which is you can see it right now. It's on the left side. It's the third one from the bottom. This little brush, this one exactly. That's the paint tool, and yeah, you can use that on any object that is a polygon object, and it will automatically also create a vertex map for you.
Cool.
All right.
Cool. Shall
So
I
yeah.
hand it over?
Yes.
Yeah. It's to you, isn't it, Jonas?
Yes.
Cool. There you go.
Cool. So now you should see my screen. Can you?
We do. Yeah.
Perfect. So what I have here is a setup that is, if I press play, it's running live. That's why it's not too fast. We could bake that down, but I wanted to use this as my starting point as well. So what I want to show you is also like a growth effect, but it's not starting like somewhere where like we define it, but it's starting where this sphere is touching the ground. And no matter where this sphere or ball, marble is rolling, the growth effect would follow that and use this as the starting point. And then we can use it in the material. So let me start in a state that is like this one. So here we go. Also, let's get rid of the material for now. Here we go. So this is my starting point. So it's just a simple sphere falling down onto this platform and then rolling over the surface. And I created the dynamic setup using a rigid body dynamics tag. You can find that under simulation tags, rigid body, and this will create this one. And if I remember correctly, it even has the default settings. And then the cube, which is the platform actually, and the plane, which is the floor, have a dynamics collision tag. So this is simulation collider body. All right, also in its default state. So now let's also start by selecting the floor object and by creating a vertex map. And just so that you have seen it, I want to go to model mode, and I want to use the paint tool and just start painting a vertex map. I'm not going to use it later, but just that you saw that this is the other way of creating a vertex map. And in paint mode, you can also decide if you want to paint vertex colors instead. So by default, it's set to vertex map. All right, cool. So now I've got this vertex map tag here. And in the basic tab, I want to check use fields as well, and then go back to the fields tab. And then I'm going to delete the freeze, and let's see what we can do now. So this sphere is supposed to create the effect and the weights. So what I do is, first, I create a spherical field, and I make it a child of the sphere. And then I just go to the transform, to the coordinates manager and hit reset transform. So now it will be in the very same spot as the sphere. And now you can see that once I select the vertex map and hit play, that our weight is following the sphere. Cool. So what we do now is we adjust the size of the spherical field, and I don't need the coordinates manager anymore, so I fold it away. And I also make this one smaller so that we just have a little bit of weight here. All right, cool. And now there are actually two ways how we could continue. The first one is the one that Elly already showed just a little bit, but we could create a decay field here on top of that. And if we now hit play, you can see that there is like a little bit of a of a tail here. So let me increase this to 80% so you can see it better. So now here you can see that it's that there are some weights here. So it's leaving something behind it. That would be one way to create an effect like that. But this would be limited to really the area where this is. But if you had, for example, like a big plane of snow or something, you can crank up the effect strength of the decay effector, the decay field to 100%, and then it wouldn't disappear. So it would stay, it would leave the track here. So if these were footsteps and so on, you could also use this technique to create the steps in the snow or something like that. All right, but I want to create a growth effect as well. So I'm going to get rid of the decay field, and I'm going to create a freeze layer instead. Elly already explained the freeze layer. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set it to grow as well. And I'm also going to set the blending mode to add in a second, because otherwise it won't do the right thing. So here we go. That was already a mistake, because if you use the freeze field, you have to keep in mind that it will always store the weight that it had when you created the freeze field. And because the sphere was here, it will always start from here. So I'm going to delete it again. And now I'm going to recreate it, because the sphere is now up here. And this will create the right thing for me. So now if I hit play, you can see that nothing is happening. Also, if I set the mode to grow, nothing should happen. All right, because we need to set the freeze layer to add. So here we go. We set it to add, and now it should work. Here we go. Of course, the effect is way too strong, way too fast. So what we can do is there are two ways of bringing down the speed here. One is by decreasing the radius, but at some point, as Elly already said, the radius needs to touch at least the adjacent points in order to create a growth effect. So if I bring that down to 2, it might work. No, it doesn't work. So that's not enough. So I set it back to 10, also because 10 is creating a nice fall off here. And instead, I'm going to reduce the effect strength, because you can also adjust the speed, the growth effect speed, using the effect strength. So if I bring this down to 20% and start from here again, you can see that this is looking quite good. All right. So I'm quite happy with this as the base, but I want this to be a little bit more organic. It's too much of the same stuff. You can see this line here, it's pretty much linear, and I want to break that. So what I can do here are two things. Either I can unfold this freeze field thing, and here you can see there is another folder for radius. So you can use other fields to control the radius of the freeze field. So this radius can be controlled by fields that you make a child of this one. Or I can add another field, like a random field, and subtract it from the whole setup. And the look is going to be a little bit different, because it's not affecting the radius, but the overall opacity of the effect. And maybe I can show you the difference here. So let me create a random field. And first of all, let me set this to a scale of 400%, and I'm gonna throw that into the radius here. So if I do that now, you can see, well, that's not too bad, but there are some areas that are like, they don't have a radius at all, and others are growing, but it also creates like this very sharp edges here. And I don't want that. And this is why I usually drag it out of this hierarchy here and place it on top of everything. And then I subtract it and bring the opacity down to something like, well, usually a value between 10 and 15% is a good starting point. So let's do this. And here we go. That's looking quite organic. And I'm already really happy with that one. Cool. And now we can use that in like different ways. We can use that, for example, in a shader. So that's the cool thing about vertex maps. You cannot just use them in the MoGraph context, but there are a lot of things that are using vertex maps. You can use them in materials. You can also use them in cloth, for example, to control the tearing and so on. So what I'm going to do just to show you that is I'm going to go to the materials, and then let me think. Yeah, I'm going to use my, well, I'm going to show it to you in a new material. That's easier to understand. So let me assign this one to the floor plane, and I'm going to double click it to open up the material editor, and then I'm going to go to the color channel, and in the texture slot I'm going to go to effects and then vertex map. By the way, if you know that something is in here but you cannot remember in which menu, you can see that we have this type to search up here. So you can just start typing and then it will filter the whole list. So here we have vertex map, and we have to click the vertex map here, and it provides us with an input field. And I'm just going to input this vertex map in here. And now you can see that we can use this vertex map in the material. And we can use that as a mask for two different material types and so on. We can use it for pretty much everything. But we can also use it, for example, to create or to restrict the effect of a displacer or so. And that's what I intend to do here. So what I'm going to do is, first of all, I'm going to colorize the vertex map so that we can still use it. So I add a colorizer. And now the cool thing about the colorizer is that we can remap the colors from black to white using this gradient. So what I'm going to do is I want to set up a few colors. Let's go with some green. That's a little bit too heavy. Here we go. Then I'm going to set up some pinkish color and some blue. And I just noticed that I made a mistake here. Let's go with the green here. And if you do it this way, that you have one color on the 0% side, one color on the 100% side, and then one in the middle, then you can create an outline for this effect, which is really cool. So let's play this back. Nice. All right. And now let me use this as the base for the displacement effect. All right, I'm going to drag and drop the random field out of here, and I'm going to create a displacer. You can find it here. If you hold down the Shift key while you have an object selected, it will automatically create it as a child. So now in the displacer, I'm going to go to the shading tab, and as the shader, I'm just going to use a color. So the displacer works as follows. If you have a plane like that, it's pretty easy to understand. Let me add a noise. We have this noise here, and everything that is black in the noise will go down, and everything that is white will go up. So what I want to have in the end is actually, I just want to have a pure color, and I'm going to use the color shader for that, and I'm going to set this to black, because this way it's going down. Here you can see again that we can move the sphere or deform the sphere just by adjusting the color here using the displacer. And now I'm going to go to the Fields tab, and let's try to input this one. So here we go. That's going to be funny because actually the sphere is supposed to go that way, but it's falling into the hole that it was creating, which is unfortunate. So what I'm going to do is one more thing. So I'm going to create a copy of this spherical field. Just create a copy, and this is my bigger one. And I'm going to increase the radius here. And then I'm also going to add this to the displacers field list and subtract it. So here we go. And now it should work. So yeah, we could fine tune the edges here. And the last thing I want to show you here before we hand over to Lionel is that you can also smooth a vertex map. So if we, let me deactivate the displacer to show that and select this one. As you can see, the vertex map is pretty sharp. But what you can do is, well, you can't really smooth it out in this field list here. But what you can do is you can just create a copy of this one. And I'm just going to throw out all of the fields that we have in here. And I'm going to rename this to number 2. So here we've got our number 1, and this is our number 2, or our smooth one, the one that is supposed to be smooth. And what we can do in the fields list, we can just drag and drop another vertex map in, and this will read the first vertex map, and then you can do something with it. So this is the vertex map tag field, and it also has a mode. So if we change that to average, you can see that we can blur this out. And I'm going to set this to, let's say, 20. So if we compare the two, that's the first one, that's the second one. The second one is way smoother. And then I'm going to use the second one instead of the first one in the displacer. So let's do it like that. Activate the displacer again, and let's see what it looks like. Yeah, that's not too bad. Maybe just crank up the effect a little bit more so we can see it. Oops. Like so. Oh, that's an interesting one. It's flickering down here. And I think this is down to, let me see. Yeah, there's a checkbox here. It's called Use Deform Points. And if we check this, it should work. So in the second one, check the Use Deform Points checkbox, and then it should work. So here we go. Now, of course, it's again so deep that it's not smooth anymore, but you get the idea, right? Cool. So yeah, that's pretty much everything I wanted to show today.
That's cool.
And yeah, Lionel has got another very exciting setup. Just let me revert to my saved project and show this to you again so you can see what you can do with this. And then we're gonna hand over to Lionel.
I love that texture. That's so cool.
Yeah.
It's wicked.
Very cool.
All right, cool. Thank you guys. Great. I'm going to hand over to Lionel now. Let me handle this. Here we go. Now you should be the presenter.
Let's go. Show my screen.
I can see it.
Does it
Yep.
work? All right.
Yep.
Okay, cool. Yeah, my trick is very similar to the one you just showed. It's some variation, so that's nice because I won't have to explain everything again because it just build the effect on top of yours. And this is a reaction diffusion effect. So it's very similar, but it's different. So what's before? Let's just explain. I'm not going to explain. You'll see why the reaction diffusion. It's something very mathematical. Okay, so I won't I won't bore you with that. But this is a real life effect you can find on chemical and so on. So it's really nice to create any animation because it's interacting with itself, as you can see here on this animation. You have those typical formation that bacteria actually use. So we can replicate that inside Cinema 4D. So yeah, it's I just want to warn you, it's a bit complicated to do and a bit erratic, meaning that it depends really on your setting. It's very sensitive. You can see here the setup is pretty simple, but to make it work, well, I hope I'll be able to do it. So let's go. I'm going to create a brand new scene. So yes, I can do it here now with Cinema 4D, R25, and I'm going to create a plane now. Okay, so I need a bunch of segments because when you use vertex map, especially for this trick, you need to have a very dense mesh. Okay, so I'm going to make it editable. I'm going to create a vertex map. So I'm going to do another variation, what you saw. This is so the paint tool. I'm doing whatever. And in the basic here, I'm going to use fields. And in the fields, I'm going to keep these fields layer. I'm going to clear it. Okay, so now we have an empty. We have an empty field. Okay, now I would like to use a spherical field, but anything it would do, a linear field or whatever. And let's make it small like that. I'm going to animate it very quickly. I can put it just outside. All right, let's auto key and let's use coordinate. And I'm going to use here, let's deactivate the Y and let's go for 50 frame. So let's start with the straight line. Well, no, I'm going to have a curved line already because it'll be more interesting. Okay, so that's it. That's very boring, but we're going to make it more interesting. So actually, we're going to create another grow effect using another way. And this one, we're going to create it from scratch because we have more control. And for this one, I have my spherical field on max on top of the freeze effect. I'm going to use the freeze effect. And if you use the mode average 10 centimeter, but you use the auto update, this is what's going to happen. So it's different from the grow effect we saw earlier. It's basically the same thing, but a bit different. I won't go in the technical details, but you can see it's very close from the grow effect. Okay, from this one, I want to create, I'm going just to change slightly the offset of our, yeah, here. Okay, so let's go back here. And I'm going now to add a curve. Okay, and the curve is going to do nothing for now. But if I change here my curve, so first I'm going to change the preset to linear. I'm going to create a new point, holding control. I'm just going to do that. You can see now we have exactly the same thing almost as the grow effect we saw earlier. Okay, so what's the use of that? Because now we're going to create more or less the same setup. We're going to subtract it from this one. And this is the core of reaction diffusion. It's a auto looping system, if you want. So it's going to feed on itself. So let's go back here. I need now to create another freeze layer. And this one is the trickiest one to set up. One rule of thumb here on my freeze layer, this is the default value. I'm going to decrease it to 7 centimeter and let's put the FX strength to 50. I'm going to deactivate this one so we can see what's going on. Okay. And the speed of the growth is determined by this one. Well, not the speed, but how it's going to spread out. Okay, and the new freeze here, I'm going to use it subtract. Very important. Subtract. And I'm going to use more or less the double value of this one. Okay, it can work with other value. We will see, because I'm not sure it's not going to work at the first time. I'll need to tweak it. Okay, so 7 and 50. Let's go to average again. Auto update, very important. And let's try 14. And yeah, I said, yeah, 100%. Okay, this is subtract. Okay, let's see what happens. So it's very, I'm not sure you can see with the compression, but there's some things happening here. Okay, we do have something. I just want to make it more obvious. So for this, I'll add a final curve layer. This one should be on add, okay? And I'm going to right click, spline presets, use linear, and I'm going to use something very close from the other one. And this is the, yeah, I'm lucky because it's almost, I almost got it. Okay, so this is the basic setup. And I got lucky, really. I'm pretty happy about that because it's
I know
difficult.
what you mean. I tried to set this up a few times already.
Yeah, it's difficult just to get there. You had to tweak a lot of things before, but I rehearsed before. But so now what I want to do is to play with all the value, and all the value interact with each of them, so it's difficult to get the right balance. And maybe I'm going to lose it along the way. So actually here, playing with this curve and the other one, I'll try to find the right balance. And here we are. I'm very lucky. Okay, not, yeah, you see the flickering? This is an effect of the auto feed loop. It's difficult to get rid of. So maybe I'll tweak it. It's very sensitive. Yeah, I think I'm not going, because I don't have the time, I'm not going to play more with it. Because I'm not sure it will hold. But
it's already looking great.
Yeah, it's really nice already. If you play here with all those value here, the radius, FX strength, but then you have to update this one accordingly. And then if you play with the curve here and this one, you will have a whole bunch of different setup. It's really fascinating because it's, yes, a bit unpredictable. And why do we bother to do something that complicated? Because this reacts like a living organism. As you can see here, when it reach each border, they're going not to bump into each other, but they're going to live on. And that's really nice. That's the effect we want to have.
Yeah, it's a structure that you can see on corals and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's the beauty of math. You find it everywhere in nature. I just try. I can't resist to try a bit. Yeah, that's more interesting. You see, I just tweaked a bit the radius, and this one is really nice. Okay, so from there, yeah, I still have 5 minutes. From there, we go back to the setup that Elly and Jonas just showed us. So it's pretty easy. I'm just going to redo quickly. So I'm going to hide this. I'm going to redo it very quickly, what Jonas showed with the displacer. Okay. And shading, we're going to use just a plain color, so it's going to jump up, well, to raise in the air. And in the field, I'm going to use the very same field, and here it is. From there, we can do well, the same stuff that it showed. One with very interesting, if you don't want to mess more here with the vertex map, you can just add on top of the plane well, under the plane, a smooth or data mesh modifier. So holding shift, I mean, you need to put it after the displacer. And this one is going to smooth, as you can see, the border and make something well, smoother. Okay, and you just need to tweak here the on the delta mesh to change here the strength and so on, and see how it works with more iteration, maybe less smoothing. Then here I need to untick the font tag so it looks nicer like that. And of course I can add on top of that just subdivision deformer, creating those value. So there's that, or the other way, you can do the copy of the vertex map Jonas showed. It's a very good trick. Or we could do with the displacer here in the fields. I could use on the very same vertex map on the displacer, I can use the average on this one. And I need to lower it a lot, like 8 centimeters. And if I do it more, you see. And nice. Here we have nice smooth. And I'll just finish. I shouldn't do it because Elly just saved it for later, but with the delay on spring on top of it, just to make sure that you follow next week. If I add a delay on it with the spring, it's going to create those very organic. Maybe it's a bit too strong, and you have your organic effect. Okay, so it's a pain in the neck to set up, but it's really nice to have this kind of result at the end. Just be careful that you need a very highly subdivided plane to get somewhere, and it must be very regular grid. Okay, so it can be difficult to use it with a complex shape because you need all quads, all with the same side of the quads and so on. It's but on a plane, of course, or a sphere or other object, you can work very well.
Yeah, what I also like is when you have like different starting points. Like if you started with a particle emitter instead, and yeah, just had one point here, one starting point there, and so on, like randomly distributed, and then you get even more of these more organic curvy lines and so on, instead of because right now we have many straight lines here. If you would start with like multiple locations where this growth is starting from, then the whole structure would be even more organic.
Well,
but this effect is totally amazing. I love it.
I could do it very quickly because it's that's exactly like you said. So let's use where is it? A spherical field, tiny one, and this one is going to be maybe here on the corner. Let's animate it. Let's go to 40, and this one will go this way, maybe more like this way. And maybe here it's going to go on the middle. Okay, we just need now to add on top of the whole hierarchy, not on the top here, on this one, spherical fill. I'm just going to add it here, max also, and that should work. And you can see they work with each other. You can see the ripple are going to join and create another kind of, well, pattern.
Look at that, it's amazing.
The power of math, and you can see the bit of flickering, so I need to tweak it again, but I don't want to do it because it's going to destroy everything. I will do that offline.
Yeah,
it's so cool.
I love that. Well, Elly was holding still all of the time, but I knew that she was having the hugest party ever. Yeah, it's so great. I love it.
Yeah,
and that's it.
Amazing.
Just in 1 hour. Whoa. We did it.
Yeah, we made it. Well, still have to take care of the housekeeping. in the end, but I think it was definitely worth overrunning because the effect is so amazing. Cool. So yeah, I'm going to grab the screen back from you. So here we go. Now you should see my screen again.
Yeah,
All right. As in the beginning, yeah, we do a lot of free webinars, and the best way to find out when the next one is going to happen is if you go to the Maxon website, maxon.net, and then under News, you go to Events, and then you find this page here. At the moment, we have quite a few shows coming up. Yeah, like the 3D motion show on Wednesday. We also have the Hands-On with Maxon series as a Cinema 4D beginners workshop. Yeah, this week, also on Wednesday. Then on Thursday, we have an Ask the Trainer session. So if you have any questions for any of the Maxon products, doesn't necessarily have to be Cinema 4D, can also be Redshift or Trapcode, VFX Suite, Magic Bullet, everything that we have, throw in your questions and we try our best to answer them. And yeah, of course, on Friday, we always have VFX and Chill, which is also a lot of fun. And Hashi and Seth are going to create a lot of cool visual effects and so on. So if you missed any of our webinars, just go to the Maxon Training Team YouTube channel. There you can find all of the recordings of our previous webinars and a little bit more. And we also want to give away t-shirts. So in the handout section of the GoToWebinar interface, now I remembered the name, you can find a link to the Maxon merch store and a coupon code. And if you use that during checkout, you can get the t-shirt for free. You only have to pay for the shipping. And there is some other cool info in there because Lionel recorded quite a few exciting tutorial series about Cinema 4D. And it's not just this one, the Essentials. There are also three others that he's offering with a huge discount for the people attending our webinars. So that's also great stuff. And yeah, I think now the last thing that I have to say is thank you everybody for attending. Thanks, Elly. Thanks, Lionel. And yeah, again, thanks everyone. Cool.
Bye.
See you next time, everyone.
Bye, everyone.